Welcome to the Lovecars On The Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars On The Grid, a packed calendar racing from all around the world. We're going from continent to continent, starting with Asia, Formula 1 and Formula 2. Then we head to Europe for WEC and MotoGP. And then it's North America for Indylights and NASCAR. Then down under to Australasia for Supercars, back home for Superbikes, and a quick trip to Austria as well, where we see the new Women's F1 Academy. We're going to start with Formula 1, Tiff. Unless you got any gossip. I mean, the hot topic for me is not really the race, although Sergio Perez is my new hero of the season.
Unbelievable. And it's a shame because, you're going to start with what? With the
I'm going to start with saying that I'm now not a Lewis Hamilton fan. I'm a Sergio Perez fan because he's the only person who can stop Max Verstappen.
But it's a shame, really, because, Max was back to moaning Max, and all the, we'll go on to the pit lane controversy as well. But it's actually a shame that all the headlines detract from an incredible weekend from Sergio Perez, who on this very podcast we have occasionally doubted his talents when compared with the mercurial Max. And he just had the most incredible weekend. And
well, you say doubted his talents. Sorry, Tiff, to cut you short, but doubted his talents. We both said he should go and they should replace him with someone else. I mean, that's how much he was doubted. But crikey, proved us wrong.
It reminds me a bit of Valtteri Bottas with Lewis, because occasionally Valtteri, when the track was one he liked and the car happened to be that weekend the car he liked, Valtteri would just on these odd occasions, be beating Lewis. And so I still don't think, Sergio's going to be a challenge to Max's championship. It was just a shame in the race, apart from anything else, that Max didn't catch him up and have a bit of a battle, wasn't it? That was one of the biggest disappointments with a very disappointing, boring, flipping race. Max couldn't catch him. I mean, we go back, and the moaning Max started, of course, in the sprint race when George came up the inside and touched his side. Those side pods must be flimsy. I think they're made of wafer thin. It's such thin carbon fibre, isn't it?
Back in the day, it must be an aluminium for you, I guess.
Yeah, you can bounce off someone, put a dent in their aluminium side pod and continue. Or fiberglass, it would have been. But even so, the Max moaning afterwards, I mean, what is he like? Honestly, one little touch. And George apologised. Said, yeah, okay, I came inside, I didn't have the grip, and I slid into you. It happens. I mean, that is, of all the racing incidents, a racing incident is when, someone on cold tyres. Max sort of said, why did you, I would overtake you in 3 laps anyway. Well, in that case, Max, why didn't you back out of it? Let George through. I mean, they were virtually side by side coming into turn one, with obviously George was a bit behind. But, if Max was this sort of, I would overtake you in 3 laps anyway, back to his arrogant self, he should have just ducked down and overtaken him in 3 laps. But
it's a shame you and I are already talking about this, and it is the hot topic. I mean, Max just completely lost it, and I can understand that. I'm going to actually stand up for Max a little bit here. I can understand that because I've been there before, and something happens, and the heat of the moment. But what I can't understand, Max, is why he's so bloody arrogant afterwards, the day afterwards, or an hour afterwards, or 10 minutes afterwards. But the day after, you've had time to think about it. You've probably looked at social media. Drop it. Just say, I overreacted, and put your hand up. What an entitled little shit he is by being like that. It's so unnecessary.
I would have had a go at straight after. I'd have had a crack at him and say, blimmin' hell, diving up the inside, you idiot. Look, we done to my butt. He apologised, sorry, mate. And then then it dies down by the end of the evening. Oh dear. And then, of course, in the race, Max moaning about the pit stops, which I don't think, you could blame the strategist. He was going on after the race. You can see the wheel was broken. Well, to be honest, when I was looking on the TV, you couldn't see whether the front left wheel was broken. I was expecting him to reverse back. So, I mean, to then have a go at his own team for losing him the race. And then he just said the car didn't handle that well. And so, Max had a bit of a bolshy. He was moaning before the race about sprint races and doesn't want to. He was just was having a bit of a moody weekend, which detracted from Sergio's amazing weekend.
Well, so, I'm going to detract a little bit more because I'm going to bring your attention to article 12.2.1.k, which is misconduct. Oh, I got an Amazon delivery. Oh my goodness, we're gonna have to
leave it at the front door, mate.
Sorry, back now. Got the delivery. So Article 12.2.1.k is about misconduct. So the whole global audience heard Max call George a dickhead. So that's misconduct. So that's a breach of the FIA rules. And what have they done? Nothing. Nothing. It's just. Well, I don't think they should do anything personally because we've all been there. But the rules are rule. In
fact, talking of new rules, another thing before we go on to the worst element of the pit lane fiasco from the FIA was that Crofty was banging on about how the Red Bull boys were all clinging to the fence, which the week before had been banned by the FIA. But it said fence climbing. The team will be punished. We couldn't quite see whether any of the Red Bull boys had climbed the fence or they were just leaning on the fence. But Crofty was pointing that out first. Maybe luckily for Red Bull, then getting the photographers out to start parking up the podium cars. And, you couldn't say that the Red Bull mechanics rushing across the road en masse sort of gave the impression to everybody else that, the race was about to be over and nothing would be coming down the pit lane. But we can't give Red Bull more stick for that. But it was a weird thing to happen and terrifying, in Ocon, because there's a kink. You can't actually see the pit lane, can you, when you're coming in from 200 miles an hour down to, 100, and then down to the pit lane speed limit, because you go through a little sort of S-bend. So it is amazing how these things come up and shoot the FIA in the foot.
So how good was Sergio Perez this weekend?
Yeah, it was just he did clip the wall though. He's admitted, hasn't he? He gave the wall. Nobody seemed to notice that on the television. He
didn't notice. Bash. Most of the drivers say, "I've hit the wall. Am I okay?" Sergio always doesn't say anything because he almost doesn't want to bring attention to his bad driving sometimes.
But we'll go on just about the race in general. We'll go on to about Baku. But there were some good results and bad results. Mercedes, it's such a shame that they were out of the pace. We keep on hoping to have at least 6 cars in with a chance. Mercedes were nowhere all weekend. And Aston Martin weren't as good. Again, it was a brilliant race. Fernando once again dived up. It was sorting Lewis out, didn't he? And went on to a good fourth place.
But in terms of Mercedes, I think for the first time ever, Lewis and they both pitted, Lewis and George, after a safety car, both on hard tyres, both same fuel, one would assume, and Lewis bossed George. Princess George, as Max likes to call him.
Yes, George had never a very good weekend. He wasn't that happy, was he, either? But at least McLaren's had a bit of a comeback. They were looking better. Was Alpine. What a weekend Alpine had. They were in the wall. They were broken down.
Poor old Gasly.
They really are. They really are going bad at the moment. Nick de Vries, another bad weekend. We talked about him after the last race, how, Yuki's sorting him out and all that promise after Monza. I'm not sure he'll be in the job for next year or even for the rest of this year, the way he's going, because, crashing qualifying, then the mistake in the race.
Who are they going to replace him with? That's the $1 million question, I guess.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know who's the next in their academy. I suppose it could be the Red Bull boy we've been talking about over in Japan, Lawson, that's doing so well in Japanese super form, and they could bring him in. They've got quite a few Red Bulls that they could give in there. But going back to Baku, this circuit, this dull race, we've got Wolf saying, we've got to sort something out at Baku. But what can you sort out? The problem is they're now saying that they've developed in the second year this new formula, Ross Brawn's great overtaking formula. I won't mention Ross Brawn too much often, how he thinks he's done such a great job. They're saying because they've now gained a bit more downforce out of these new regulations, they're causing more of a wake again, so overtaking is harder than ever before. And DRS is still a weird thing, isn't it? To Joe Public or even to me and you, we see what Red Bull's got this amazing flap design. The way he overtook, it was just drive by, And yet in the middle of the field, you've got Hulkenberg, who started on the hard of the medium tyre at the back. And then all the tyre changes came up behind. And we had a Hulkenberg queue. Now, this all relates to the fact that you can have a car like a Williams is the same. They're quick in a straight line on their own. And the other cars are a bit draggy and not as smooth as Red Bull, can't even overtake. Whereas in a DRS zone, which Red Bull make as a drive past, and everybody else just I can't. No, I haven't got enough to get by Hulkenberg in a Haas with worn out tyres. I mean, you need, because towards the end of the race they did start overtaking Hulkenberg because his tyres finally lost their grip. So
well,
you
of
almost
course,
need
Hulkenberg and Ocon were both hoping for another safety car, of course.
Which is why Ocon was still out with 1 lap to go, which is, of course, something that the Williams did so well, didn't they, a year or two ago, with a brilliant drive to got them through. But so what do you do about Formula One? If they're admitting it was a boring race, and they're admitting, I mean, Baku was a fab. I love the look of Baku. I love watching racing cars around Baku. It's a spectacular scene. It's a great for cars on their own. So many shots of them just skimming the walls. That's what I love to see, that jeopardy.
Like slow-mo shots skimming the walls and going up by the castle, that little chicane. Amazing.
And it's fast as well. It's a fast. I don't know what you do. We've got these regulations for 3 more years, and I can't see any major changes being made. So they're talking about tinkering. What do you tinker with? I mean, you tinker with DRS. So if you gave more DRS length, which would help the midfield boys, then you give Red Bull an even bigger advantage. So it's finding a rule that suits some and not others. That doesn't something that suits everybody. Maybe it's in the tyres. Maybe they've got to sort out tyres to a different degree of degradation or something that gives a better strategy. That's when you get more overtaking, when one tyre in front of you's got really worn out tyres. It's all a bit artificial. That's not real racing, is it? You got any clues? How are you going to sort out Baku to be we got it signed. They've signed the contract next 3 years, so we're going there.
Baku was more exciting than a lot, just for that reason alone. Like you said, the jeopardy of getting so close to the barriers, and it's not like you got any runoff. If you hit the barrier, then typically, as we found out with a couple of the guys, you're out of the race. So Perez was lucky, but Perez did well. But the story of the weekend probably. And again, we're not talking about it, was Charles Leclerc, who managed to get pole position for both races, which is pretty phenomenal, really. It just shows the pace of the single race. But then as soon as you get out of a single lap, as soon as you get out into the race, that's it.
He wears his tyres out. That's the trouble. Leclerc, he virtually let Max by. He didn't try and defend, because he knows that he can't do that pace in the race without the tyres getting. So this is the incredible Red Bull design, that they go faster than anyone else, and wear their tyres out less than anyone else, and have got a better DRS than anyone else. It's just an incredible design, and that's it. That's it for the next 3 years if all these modifications on the other cars don't work.
We've seen it many times before with teams that dominate, though, and you can't take it away from Adrian Newey and Red Bull. But Christian Horner, not that he listens to this, but just smile once in a while. Don't be so smug. Don't be so conceited all the time. Just smile once in a while. You're doing so well. Your team is amazing. I just like to see a smile every time he goes on Sky Sports.
It's serious. It's serious.
Oh, it's so serious.
Yes, serious thing,
the Ferraris are really fast this weekend, and we got our work cut out. No, you haven't. It's another 1-2 unless you crash. Ugh.
Right, let's move on from a boring Grand Prix, boring race. But
who was your driver of the weekend?
Oh, obviously Ollie Bearman in the Formula 2
race. Formula 1. Who was your driver of the weekend? We'll come on to Formula 2.
Well, nobody stood out, really. I mean, who did anything out of the ordinary apart from Perez? Perez is my driver of the weekend because he did something against the grain. Blew Max away. So
managed his tyres. Well done, Sergio. Okay.
But Ollie Bearman.
Well done, Ollie Bearman. You've said it.
I've been said it for 2 years. I've been saying it for years.
Yeah, years.
Incredibly, next week he'll be old enough to vote. I mean,
How old is he? Is he 19?
17. 17. Wow. 17-year-old. He's won in Formula 4 and Formula 3 races he's won. And just, he's on pole position. I don't know quite why he started 9th and not 10th in the reverse grid race. Anyway, he started 9th, whatever. Someone must have had a grid deduction. It was a bit fortuitous because when they had a restart after all on coldish tyres, the front two both hit the wall. But then, Ollie Bearman didn't hit the wall. He got through in turn 1, and then he managed to out-fumble his teammates, the much more experienced teammate, the same car. Prema, obviously, is a really good car. Prema Motorsport, we always say, is the best chassis, but the best drivers tend to get there. And he just did Vesti on the last lap with a lovely undercut. And then in the main race, he just dominated. I mean, it's incredibly good. And I don't think I looked it up. People are saying he raced at Baku. He didn't. Formula 3 weren't at Baku last year, so I don't think he's even raced around Baku. A rookie coming along.
Wow.
A fastest lap. So I really.
When did he win the Autosport Award? Was that last year or the year before?
He hasn't done it. That's the point. I want to see the judges. I want to stand on Derek Warwick's toes and say, why? How? The guys that Zach O'Sullivan beat him last year. Who beat him this year? Somebody else beat him this year. The name's gone. Incredible. Yeah. So I want to know why Bearman, they think he was the second best driver 2 years running. Fascinated to know that. Fascinated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but he did incredibly well. And those things sound good as well. They sound a bit better than
sound great. There's some good racing. There's some ducking and diving going on in the midfield. So yeah, it was a good race, the Formula 2.
Good.
So then we'll leave Formula 1, the controversial world of Formula 1, and head to the fast developing. Let's go into Europe for the WEC, the World Endurance Championship. What a race on Saturday they had. This new hypercars and the Daytona hypercars. A lot of controversy, though, which maybe if we go to the race, this cold tyre problem, which I'm hoping the Grand Prix drivers aren't listening to the World Endurance Championship drivers. They're all moaning like mad. They've got no tyre warmers at Spa. It was cold. Of course, they had the first round in Sebring. But even Sebring, James Collado on an outlap put his Ferrari into the wall. Now, when they talk about these tyres, Michelin, the tyre manufacturer, any tyre manufacturer, they can make the cold tyre first lap grippier. So there are ways. The tyre engineers could help this problem. But these very complicated hypercars, all their electric generation and masses of torque, are incredibly difficult on cold tyres. A lot of the drivers, and Brendan Hartley stuck his Toyota in the barriers at the top of Eau Rouge on an outlap, didn't even do a qualifying lap. So they had to start from the back of the grid. James Collado, as I said, had a crash at Sebring. And in the race, Antonio Fiocco in the Ferrari, battling for third place. And he was just coming out of the pit lane at La Source hairpin. There's a slight kink as you're going down the hill towards Eau Rouge. And you could hear a whoop, the traction was broken by the massive torque. And he punted it into the barriers. Now, some may say, and I would say, that it's something they've got to get used to. They didn't all crash. It wasn't as if everybody coming out of the pit lane found their car uncontrollable.
But surely you get used to it. The Twitter was a light, wasn't it? With people saying, we've got to have, this is dangerous. You've got to have tyre warmers.
No. But,
manage it.
You lose 10 seconds. That's the problem. This is what I like about cold tyres, because we'll come to the IndyCar race later, which came alive because you had a car come out the pit on cold tyres and another car attacking it. And it's just a driver's skill.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it is so silly at the moment that it should be a little bit better by working on the tyre compounds or something. But I remember at Le Mans now, they built a slick that works in the wet. So if they can drive those, but they heated up, I don't know, they heated up. But the point is, it is very tricky. They are moaning a lot, but not everybody crashed. But it still was a stunning race because Colin said the race started in wet track, a drying wet track, and the Toyota started on slicks. The lead, Mike Conway, who had the start, he was on pole because the Ferrari lost their pole position from Giovinazzi due to track limits. And they showed the incident. It was up at what they call a Malmedy at the top, where there's a huge curve, then gravel. And he actually had two wheels in the gravel, spitting gravel. And I sort of think, well, surely the gravel there is a self-policing track limit, because you don't want to be in too much of gravel, it'll slow you down. So I would have thought at certain corners, when you go over a curve onto a tarmac runoff and you gain an advantage coming out of the corner, I suppose rules are rules. But anyway, he just put a couple of wheels on the gravel at Malmedy, so lost his pole position. Then there's amazing, first 10 laps, this Toyota on slicks, just dropping back like a stone while the Ferraris rush forward in their wet tyres. So
Ferraris win in terms of looks. Cool, that's a good looking.
I know. But not with the onboards. Don't listen to too much on. The only trouble is these fabulous looking hypercars, brilliant spectacle for the future. Onboard sound is horrendous. It sounds like a Formula E when you're in the cockpit, because all that regen. It's a regen that makes all the noise. But then the race progressed. There was all sorts going on. I mean, René van der Zand had a huge shunt down at Eau Rouge in his Cadillac, big crash. took too much curb on the left-hand side and bounced the car up and lost control. Jacques Villeneuve was taken out by a wandering Italian amateur, Francesco Castellacci. Took the Vanwall out. It's great it's a Vanwall name. They're still struggling. They're about the slowest of them. 13 hypercars in the race at Spa, so growing field. I just love watching it. Richard Westbrook was with a star, the Cadillac. He was trying to overtake a Ferrari for lap after lap, but the Ferrari was a bit quicker out of Eau Rouge, quicker up the long straight. There was great dicing going on. Peugeots were rubbish again. I predicted that as well. As soon as I saw the wingless car.
Because it's got no wing, Tiff. One of my mates told me that. But they'll be all right in Le Mans.
That's the only race. I've driven so many tests with cars with wings hung low at the back. And unless you've got Adrian Newey doing it, it doesn't work. So they struggle like mad. Great battle right at the end. James Calado and the surviving Ferrari was catching the Cadillac. I don't know who was driving it. Whose Cadillac was running third. And I'm going to have to cough. Slight cough. Got past the third place about 3 laps to go. So great drive by James Calado to get the Ferrari up on the podium. So lots of stuff going on. Of course, there's LMP2, which also provides great racing. Forget who won it. Where have I got it? So by Robert Kubica. That was a bit of news. Yeah, Robert Kubica. Yeah. I mean, it's Kubica or Kubica. I've always said Kubica, but some people say Kubica. So great to see him again. He's disappeared out of the Formula One world, but he's still a professional racing driver, winning races. He's having a great time.
Do you say Porsche or Porsche?
Porsche. I was having been a factory Porsche cars, Great Britain man. I have to obviously know how to pronounce the word correctly.
Do you say Munich or München?
I say Munich. Don't you start now. Because you should mention the winning Toyota was Mike Conway, who led away from pole with Kamui Kobayashi and Jose Maria Lopez. The other Toyota came all the way from the back of the grid to still finish second. I mean, they still dominate in efficiency and team orders and pit stops and strategy. So the other Porsches, I say, came through to second. But the Cadillac, there was a Porsche, not a Cadillac, he took the third place off, was the first Porsche in fourth place. They're all the lead lap. So Ferrari, Porsche and Toyota all in the lead lap. Finding GT, the big story GT was this French girl, this 22-year-old young lady, Lilou Wadou, who was part of the winning team in her Ferrari. Again, it's sort of, you never know when they're sharing a car, how quick they are, because Lilou is quick, but I'd love to know individual lap times, because you've got a very quick young Italian, Alessio Rivera, is part of the team as well. So
it was brilliant. It was fantastic that a female won and was on the top 7 podium. Absolutely fantastic.
Put in single seaters.
Yeah. Well, we'll come on to that in a moment with Indylights. But again, I think we just got to be a bit realistic. We just got to get more women into motorsport. Well, if they want to, if they choose to do that. But because it shouldn't be about men and women. It should just be.
No, I know. Well, a lot of fuss was making by the commentators that she was the first winner of a world championship race or something. Desiree Wilson, the greatest, fastest female driver I raced against in the British Formula One Championship. Really talented female driver. She won the Monza 1,000 kilometres and the Silverstone 6 outright in a prototype car. But that I think it was called the World Endurance Drivers Challenge or something. But it was still a world championship.
Yeah, good for her.
They're trying to make headlines, but there's still no doubt.
Louise Deason, Caterham racing driver, very fast.
You keep on moving back. You've got to move up the levels. But still, nevertheless, a great drive like Lilou. She actually tested a hypercar, I think, over the winter and did some impressive lap times. So I'd love to see her in a single-seater, see how she can get on.
Yeah.
So great entertainment at Spa in the World Endurance Championship.
I love jumping around a little bit. So 2021 Autosport Young Driver was Zach O'Sullivan. 2022 was Luke Browning.
Luke Browning, that's it. Yeah. And they're both really talented. Both Zach and Luke are really good.
And 200 grand better off as well, because that's what they win, which I didn't realise.
Yes. As opposed to the £1,000 I won when I won the equivalent award in 1976. So now move further west. We're moving west all the time. The MotoGP, Jerez. Fantastic race, the MotoGP. They put on a show, don't they? I mean, but there were 2 nasty crashes in the sprint race. There was a nasty crash at turn 2, which took out the championship leader, Marco Bezzecchi, who's got a bit beaten up. They also fell off in the main race. So the championship leader had a terrible weekend. riding for the Valentino Rossi's team. But the sprint race was epic because we got these KTM boys, and they're both full on. Brad Binder, the South African, Jack Miller, the Aussie, who was sacked by Ducati last year, and he's now in this KTM. And KTM had got this bike working better and better because Binder won, not Brazil, Argentina, that weird track in the middle. He won the sprint race before, but now they got quick bikes, and they were battling for the lead teammates. And I mean, Binder's got this sideways style. He was going into the turn 6 hairpin with like a speedway rider almost. He would brake so late, drop the back out, then hold it on the throttle. And that huge grin, I'm sure he's got extra teeth because when he smiles, you just see teeth. But he held on to win, whereas the reigning champion, Bagnaia, Ducati, managed to split the two KTMs at the end, got ahead of Miller, and Jorge Martin was fourth. And the front four covered by 0.853 of a second in the sprint race. The main race then had another nasty crash, which affected the race. Had to have a red flag it going into turn 2 again, where Fabio Quartararo in the Yamaha was having an awful season. The bike's slow. He's a former world champion. And he's fighting almost too hard. He had this clash, which sadly put Miguel Oliveira at hospital with a dislocated shoulder. And the stewards penalised Quartararo. And although the commentators said it was just an accident, I think Quartararo was being a bit too aggressive because he put his front wheel between two bikes ahead of him. And the one on his right, who happened to be Bezzecchi, closed him down a bit. But he just clattered into both of them and took Oliveira with himself into the gravel. Got a drive-through penalty for the restart. Because luckily, because of a red flag, Quartararo was able to go back and get on a spare bike and join the pack for the restart. He had to do a long lap, as they call it, which is quite a good idea. I quite like the handicap. So you have to go through the longer loop. But on the way out of the loop, out of a hairpin, he's inside the road and he looks over his shoulder because he's got to rejoin safely. And his rear tyre went, I don't know, that much into green tarmac. And the way it was painted, because it's blue with white light, and it just, the line sort of had a bit of kink. So he just put his rear tyre over 2 feet and got another long lap penalty. Now, by now, the commentators get a bit peed off. They didn't agree with the first penalty. They got even upset with the second penalty. And then Bagnaia, we had the KTMs out front again in the main race, but Bagnaia had this big lunge at Miller and into the hairpin. Miller went a bit wide, so Bagnaia put his wheels in and they had a bit of a bump. Just a bit of a bump. As they came out of the corner, Bagnaia apologised, put his hand up. Sorry, mate. Miller did a sort of Australian no problem sign or something. I couldn't see the hands. Anyway, and the stewards made Bagnaia drop back behind Miller. They ordered him to drop back. The commentators who now, they're commentating like we were in Formula One about 10 years ago. All these extra regulations and stewards are becoming obsessive in MotoGP, and they're getting fed up with it, saying, well, this is racing, we're going to ruin the racing. So there were a bit of controversy, but nevertheless, the race was still fantastic because Binder got out to the front again. It was pulling away a bit, made a bit of gap. And then Bagnaia, had to overtake Miller twice because he'd done it once. They got told to drop back and then he did it again. Tracked him down and got by with about 3 laps to go or 2 laps to go. Binder had another go, tried to stay with him. But it was a really, really cracking race on these amazing bikes. It was actually the same podium, though, the main race, although Bagnaia won the main race. Binder won the sprint because Jorge Martin came fourth yet again. So great stuff. Moto2, bit like a Formula One race. Moto2 was dull. I hate to say this about motorbike race, boys, but it was dull. Apart from the fact the person out front, miles out front from pole position, was none other than Britain's Sam Lowes. So although it wasn't a very hectic race, it was fantastic. Sam hasn't won for a year and a half. And he just dominated because the guy chasing him, he broke Spain's hearts, he did, because the great Pedro Acosta was just shadowing him, but couldn't catch him, couldn't do anything about it. So the massive Spanish crowd had to see a Brit beat their hero. Jake Dixon.
Do you know everyone keeps going on about Formula One? You said it about 5 times, that how boring it was. I didn't think it was that boring. I genuinely think, because of the speed, how close it was to the wall all the time, I genuinely think we've had most of the Formula Ones like that, a Red Bull procession. They had
but it's usually a bit we're overtaking in the mid pack. They just Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I agree when I said it's a spectacular track to watch Formula One cars go around.
I could think of a lot worse.
So Jake Dixon finished 6th. Moto3, Scott Ogden had a good race. He qualified 11th, but he always drops back at the start. He doesn't seem to be quite aggressive enough. He's fallen off quite a few times. He's probably being a bit careful. He dropped down to about 15th at one stage. We finished 12th on the back of the sort of pack. But at least Spain were happy. The Spanish crowd were pleased because Ivan Ortula, something like that, won. Amazing, 9 bikes, nine bikes, almost 9 abreast into the last corner. Fantastic racing for the Moto3 boys. Do you watch the bikes much?
No, not much. I like it when I put it on, but I forget to put it on. So I do like watching it, but it just amazes me how...
Record, but there's a recording system.
No.
It's very good because you can watch it times 30. I think the Sam Lowe's winning the Moto3 race took about 3 minutes of my life times 30.
I quite like all the highlights that they have on various different channels and YouTube and stuff. I quite like highlights, but you don't really get a feel for it with the highlights.
No. So now we go west even more, over the Atlantic Ocean to IndyCar at this most amazing Barber motorsport circuit. Did you watch any of that?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
I love it. Beautiful track. Just undulating. Most of it is just a white line grass, beautiful grass. You can see the line of the track. A few gravel traps where it's really important, but difficult to overtake. So it's not well known for its overtaking around here. There are 27 cars, the opening laps, them all up and over the hill. It was just great sight. And Romain Grosjean took pole position. We're still waiting for Romain, and it was dominated really by Romain and the Kiwi Scott.
Why are you so obsessed with Romain Grosjean winning an IndyCar?
Because I like Romain Grosjean.
Why?
And he hasn't won a race since he's in Formula 2.
Exactly.
Because he hasn't had the right car. Now he's in equal equipment.
He still hasn't won a race.
Showing his talents. No, when he got taken out at Long Beach, not long, at St. Petersburg, when he should have won. And this was just a fantastic battle.
Don't get it wrong. I mean, I think he's a lovely bloke, and he shouldn't even be here. How that crash that happened in Bahrain was just... How he walked away from that is nuts. Okay, so what were the main highlights?
The problem with Barber Motorsport is the length of the track and the way it works is always half between going for 2 stops, they refuel, or a 3 stop. Yeah. So this is a strategy.
Awards problem here.
It's always causes conflict. And of course, people say, Formula E, they're energy saving, and they watch a bit of IndyCar race. And of course, if you're a 2-stopper, you have to save energy.
Yeah,
that's your choice. You can stop 3 times and fill up with fuel and race flat out, which is what McLaughlin was doing.
Yeah.
Whereas Romain was on the 2-stopper. So it's different. And of course, the tyres, we talk about tyres I mentioned for Formula One. Maybe they should look at the tyre, the difference between the grade, mediums, and softs. Because in IndyCar, they have the reds and the blacks. The blacks are quite a lot slower and the reds wear out, but you have to run both compounds at least once. So maybe the difference in their tyres works better. Anyway, it all came down to this fantastic battle where Grosjean was just holding off McLaughlin for lap after lap after lap. And then when he went into pit, McLaughlin obviously took the lead. Grosjean was running about 7th when he came back after his 2nd stop. McLaughlin had to do one more stop. But McLaughlin charged on for a couple laps, and then after his final stop, came out just in front of Grosjean, but on cold tyres. Obviously, it's warmer in America, and these tyres are used to being used. So now Roman's on the back of McLaughlin for this first lap out of the pits, and did this most amazing overtake into the final corners. He went round the out. It's a right-left downhill, and Roman went round the outside of McLaughlin, barged through into the left-hand side, clash of wheels, and took the lead. A fantastic overtaking manoeuvre. McLaughlin then's in his track. So, of course, they got pushed to pass, which I think is way, way better than stupid DRS because you use it to defend or attack, and you've got 200 seconds. You can use it in 20-second bursts. But Roman had used it all, I think, attacking McLaughlin when he came out of the pits. Didn't have as much left. But McLaughlin had kept... awful word to say quickly. He kept a bit back and managed when Roman went wide going into the turn 6 or something, the left-hander. McLaughlin got alongside of the exit and just managed to outpower him and went on to win. So push to pass, really good. But you can't do that in Formula One because I think with all the different engine specifications, you wouldn't be able to have a system that would be fair to all. So,
well, you've got the battery save. You've got the battery extra hybrid gives you another 100 horsepower, which I would like to know when the drivers are using that on screen. I'd like to know what drivers are using it and when, because then they recharge it. but
Which
not
I
quite
should
pushed
talk
fast.
about that. I meant to mention the sprint qualifying I really enjoyed in Formula One. This because they could only do, because they have to back off, they have to save battery, they could only do 2 laps each. And so they all went out and did a slow lap, and they all did a fast lap, which gave a lap first grid position. Then they all had to do a slow laps to recharge and cool their tyres off. But nobody was out of sync. You didn't have this terrifying view of when they're all going, some are going slow and others are still on a high-speed lap and holding people up. So I thought that was really entertaining. FP3, just give them one set of tyres, all on softs.
Sorry to jump back, but what did you think of the sprint race? Do you think we should do more sprint races? Having the Friday qualifying, was that right? Yeah. Friday qualifying, Saturday sprint. Yeah,
I enjoy them. Yeah. Gives us 3 highlights. Gives us qualifying on a Friday, sprint on a Saturday. Yeah, I enjoy them. Anyway,
it's like people like you that don't have to go to work on a Friday, I guess.
I might have to work some Fridays. You can always record them. But no, I thought it was good. But anyway, watching those Indy cars around there, brilliant. Good to watch. Of course, they have their Formula 2 Indy NXT next. But we have 4 British drivers out there all trying to move up the ladder in America. Louis Foster was lead qualified 3rd. But unfortunately, he was going for 2nd place and went off. He might have his throttle stick open, he was saying afterwards. Toby Sowery, who's always a talented driver, but always runs out of money, hasn't raced for a year and a half. Yeah, he came through the 3rd place. And Enam Ahmed, who was another Autosport finalist, he finished 4th. So had 2 Brits, although he's Enam is half Pakistani, half British. He flies under both flags. Race dominated by this.
How can you fly under both flags? Choose one. You got to choose one.
I know.
Brian Cullen.
What's Albon? It's Alexander Albon. He's tying now.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, whoever pays him the money. Brian Cullen, he's born and bred Somerset, but of course his father's Irish, so a mate of ours. So he flies under the Ireland flag. But
where did he finish the weekend? Do we know?
No, I don't know. We need to follow up a bit more.
But the Dane Christian Rasmussen.
Hang on, there's a 4th Brit.
Get in there. Just going to say, we'll come to that. I thought last. The race was dominated by this Dane who's in his 2nd year, whereas Louis Foster, rookie, and so's Enman Abboud. But yes, there was another Brit out there, Jamie Chadwick, who I think she's brave going for this. It's obviously a good deal to go away from maybe mainstream journalists and stuff. But yeah, she qualified 17th and the 18. Got clattered, went 3 wide for the first turn with her on the outside.
Put a few laps down, didn't it, Tiff?
But they changed the front suspension. They just wanted to give her mileage. She just needs more mileage in these cars. She actually was the last person still running. She was classified 11th, but she was 3 laps down. To be honest, there's an Irishman out there as well.
Just on that subject, I just hope that the people, because we all would love to see a lady in Formula 1, but all these people are jumping on W Series for 2 years saying Jamie Chadwick, who won it quite comfortably both years, she should be in Formula 1. I hope they understand now the gap is just vast, because we're talking Indylights here. We're not even talking Indycar, Formula 1. The gap is quite vast at the moment, and I'm sure it will change. And she's one of the best drivers female drivers in the world.
Well, she was sponsored by Ronan. Is it Ronan? Let's get the name slightly wrong. This New Zealand team that built Formula 1 car. Because apparently the entries to join the club in 2026, the FIA applications went in last night, I think. There was rumour that Ronan was going to be one of them, and they would guarantee a female driver. Now, unfortunately, they can't guarantee because you have to get a super license. But obviously, there's still people are trying to do it. But you do, I think we should, if they cheat the super license to get a woman in, I think that wouldn't do women's sport any good at all.
We love Jamie Chadwick. We know Ollie Chadwick, her brother as well. They've both been on the show, on the TV show. But I just think it just does show the gap between the men and the women at the moment.
Well, I'm sure Jamie, she could step into a GT3 car now and have a wonderful career, like Wadu and the Iron Dames, the 3 women that won their classes at Sebring, didn't they? Do a really good job. So there's plenty of other opportunities. You don't have to be a Grand Prix driver. One other final story also out in America is Matteo Nannini, who's the nephew of Alessandro Nannini, the former Grand Prix driver. He also had a controversial clash, which I think he's taken his European driving habits to America. And someone out say he got half a car length overtaking through the left hand onto the pit straight, and then once they got to the straight, he just moved over, and the guy was sitting there, and so Nannini went around the front to the American driver and hit the wall, took them both out. And then he just said, wasn't my fault. And even though the stewards actually didn't say it was his fault, well, it obviously was. Maybe they didn't want to upset an Italian. So also in America, we didn't have any NASCAR racing to keep you awake last night. We rained off. In fact, it's happening about now. They are going round the Dover Mile. So that was rained off. So we didn't have any more excitement.
With about 1,000 people watching, I expect.
Yeah, Monday. Probably not a bank holiday in America, is it? Down to Australia as we continue round the world. The Aussie Supercars at Wanneroo, mate. Wanneroo. Good accent there. And still no joy for the Mustangs. Ford still nowhere. But they finished third. They had some podiums. But the Camaros were first and second in all three races. Winners for Van Gisbergen, Will Brown and Brock Feeney. I need someone. I tried to Google it, but websites are so annoying when all flower. All you want is facts. I wanted to find out how they qualify for the three races. Because Van Gisbergen was pole and won, and then he was down the middle and he was up and down. And it seems to be hard to sort of win them all or be up the front. So they must, I don't know, reverse grids. Or I tried to find the details for the website. So many websites just have flour and fluff, and you want facts. Because in fact, the championship leader is Brody Kostecki, who've had 2 seconds and a third. He didn't win any races, but he's now moved to the points lead. So we need an Australian correspondent to write to us or put comments below how they qualify for the three races.
We don't get comments.
That's because your website's wrong. You need to get it checked out.
Well, hopefully it's because people are listening to it on their way to work or where they're going. So hopefully it's that reason. That's what I'm going to convince myself anyway.
So apologies for not knowing more Supercar stuff, but all I do know is the Camaros are still upsetting the Mustangs. And all the way home we come, Superbikes, who are still going on today. So there's 2 races today. I don't know. The only bank holidays motorsport I know of mainstream. But yesterday, 40-year-old Josh Brooks, 40-year-old still racing bikes, the Aussie, incredible. He won on the BMW to extend his championship lead and might be winning more as we speak. And then finally, as we said, we were looking at the FIA Academy. This, I don't know, this new... was it 5 teams, 3 cars, 15 cars? They were down at, you can't see it because they seem to not want to have it on television for some reason.
Why wasn't it live streamed? I mean, Caterham's live streamed on YouTube. Just live stream it on YouTube.
I know.
Why was it not in Baku? So this is the what was the W Series effectively. Yeah. Is the ladies series now, the F1 Academy.
So now
why wasn't it in Baku?
Maybe they thought they'd be embarrassed by the fact that one team got caught for cheating. It did have an embarrassing start because Abby Pulling, who we thought, the British driver, we thought she might win. She was on pole. She got 2 pole positions in wet qualifying. But then the 3 Carling cars all got chucked out for some not homologated part on the front of the floor or something. Some little technical infringement had them all stuck at the back of the grid. So that was the first embarrassment. Anyway. There didn't seem to be much overtaking. The Spanish girl, Marta Garcia, who was one of the W Series front runners, she had 2 wins. The Emirati, Amna Al-Kwabasi, won the reverse grid race, which is quite a surprise that nobody else came through. The British driver, Jessica Edgar, the best Brit was Jessica Edgar, who came 3rd in the first race. Abby Pulling had a couple of 4ths, and the Scot, Chloe Grant, had a best of 9th. So it didn't seem like there was much excitement in the race reports.
But how can it be the F1 Academy that doesn't follow the F1?
Well, because the FIA are paying for it.
Well, I realise that, but call it something else then. Call it something else Academy. But if F1 Academy, surely it should follow the Formula 1 races. Should go to.
Well, it's coming. The final round is, and apparently next year there will be. I think they didn't want to start with a big hurrah like W Series perhaps overdid and not look good. It doesn't sound like the first 3 races were that exciting. So yeah, I think not a bad idea. Why put pressure on the girls and boys, girls and women? I was about to say.
Well, hang on a minute. Put pressure. You think the girls would prefer to be racing in Austria? The ladies, women, would prefer to be racing in Austria than with the Formula 1 guys in Baku?
No, I know they prefer it, but maybe all the media pressure. They all have to interview and stand in line, don't they, for the W Series? They're all up for PR and press.
They love it. That's why they're doing it.
Well, anyway, they're now paying 150 grand each to not love it down in Austria. If they were loving it, they were still loving it. Less
so 150
pressure.
grand each, all expenses paid, everything paid for. How many drivers?
No, I don't know how expensive.
16 again, or is
you have to pay? It's 50. It's 5 teams of 3.
Okay, and is there the $500,000 prize money?
No money. No. It's just a budget race series with a lot of help and advice and teaching and coaching. I mean, it's Formula 4. It's not a W series is equivalent to Formula 3.5. So it's just right back to the grassroots. It's really to attract karters out of karts into cars. I think that's the sort of theme for the future. It's certainly not making a Formula 1 driver tomorrow.
Okay. But it might attract the Formula 1 driver of tomorrow.
It will. I mean, there's going to be more Grand Prix tracks next year. I think they're right. They're right to have a quiet launch.
Okay. So I would like to see it still being televised or live streamed on YouTube. Tiff, next week. I know. There's
Beach, baby.
Oh no, there's a bigger one than that. There's a bigger one than Miami Beach.
Oh, not a Caterham race, is it?
No, I'm in Monaco with Cupra for the Formula E.
God, Monte Carlo, Formula E.
I know. I think, it works there, actually. I think I'm a big fan of Formula E. I've mentioned that a few times on this. I'm a massive fan of Cupra.
Monaco. It is in Monaco because I said last week, they're getting these bigger tracks and they all don't want to leak. They're all trying to save. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And you're going to be coming back with a report. I told you last time.
Full report
about
of the nightclubs,
about
of
how
the bars.
embarrassing it is that they all have to save too much energy and how stupid it is they take time attack just to not attack.
The beaches, the food,
More importantly, what celebrities are going to be on the grid in Miami? This is the most important thing. Formula 1 can recover from the embarrassment of Baku by having some real proper celebrities for Martin.
I'm going to name 2, and then you've got to name 2. Brad Pitt, Usain Bolt, they'll both be there. And a basketball player of some sort. And a couple of Miami Dolphins players.
I don't care. Superbikes in Barcelona. Still in Spain, the Formula Academy women, ladies, girls are in Valencia. So they're having another triple header this weekend. NASCAR goes up to the 1.5 mile Kansas Speedway. But for British circuit goers, instead of television watchers, they've got a choice this weekend, BTCC at Brands Hatch and the British GT at Silverstone. So obviously the BTCC had a fantastic first weekend at Donington. And I'm sure they'll be banging doors down at Brands Hatch. Or for a bit more sophistication, British GT also bang doors are at Silverstone. So masses of more motorsport next weekend. Including
Cupra, Formula E, Monte Carlo. And on that note, thanks for watching. Wish Tiff good luck with his football team who are going down. And see you next week.